Force a turnover at halfway. Yes, sir.
Clock at 10. Adams the off balance.
Oh my goodness! Two on the clock.
Alrighty, guys, and welcome back to the Basketball Fix podcast. And we are going to be continuing on with our NBL Free Agency Fix, day number 7. Obviously, these haven't been continuous days. We're not on the 7th straight day, but once the NBL free agency season really starts to ramp up, we'll be definitely doing these episodes daily with all the news and information coming out and delivering that to you. But today we've got a bit of a special guest here, one of our own podcasts here at the Basketball Fix, the Hawks Hangout. Obviously, one of their hosts as well in Sammy James. Mate, how you feeling? It's been an incredible season for the Illawarra Hawks. There probably wasn't a better time like this season to start off an Illawarra Hawks podcast, was there?
No, mate. It was you know what? It's been an absolute blessing in disguise. The year you start the podcast, your hometown team goes on to win the championship, beats Perth in the process. It's nothing better. Nothing better, mate.
Of course, you had to bring up Perth there, mate, but we'll get stuck into it. That in another episode, I'm sure. But yeah, we've both been relatively busy. Obviously, the NBL season's finished, but the NBL 1 season is just starting. I commentated last night for the Rockingham Flames. They've got a very exciting team down there. And you were over east, mate, watching some of the Illawarra Hawks guys play for their NBL 1 team as well. How was that?
Yeah, it was beautiful. Taking it back to the glory days over at the Snake Pit. Toddy had an absolute blinder. He won't let us live down not mentioning the 5 blocks that he had during out the night. But it was also great to also see all of the boys come out and support as well. So we had Hickey come along, we had Yates come along, Froling was there, Wani, Davo, all of the boys that were still here that hadn't left yet were there in attendance to watch Brad, Kobe, and Blanchfield play. So the atmosphere was just absolutely unreal.
It's a weird name. Like, I've been seeing it float around on Instagram, the Snake Pit, and I'm just like, it doesn't really make sense. Like, you've got the Cairns Taipans, their home arena is called the Snake Pit as well. Their, adopted sort of nickname for it. But the Hawks with the Snake Pit, you can kind of get it, but you kind of can't at the same time. But yeah, we'll digress here anyways, mate. But it's going to be a great episode today. I'm looking forward to sort of breaking down the Illawarra Hawks, obviously the championship winning Illawarra Hawks as well. And we'll briefly touch on who they've got returning to the club, some of the contractor players heading into NBL 26. We'll then dive into some of the uncontracted players and, briefly touching on whether we want to see them return or not. I'm sure every single one of them will be wanting to return, and I'm sure Sammy as well will be wanting them to return as well. But we'll be making sure that they obviously have a bit of room to be able to bring in some new pieces if that is required. I also want to touch on a bit of Coach's Corner with JT. I know there's probably a massive chance he will stay for the Illawarra Hawks, but there's still those rumblings that are starting to sort of pick up here and there about a potential NBA gig as well. And then we'll get into the last little bit of the segment as well. The rumour mill, obviously one big name, which we'll touch on a little bit later, may be a returning face to the Illawarra Hawks in NBL 26, which I'm sure a lot of Illawarra Hawks supporters are very excited about. But Sammy, mate, let's move into some of these contractor players. Are you able to let the listeners know at home, and I'm sure there's a lot of Illawarra Hawks faithful there, about some of these guys who will be returning in NBL 26, and we'll get into a bit of discussion about a couple of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So kicking it off, the 3 big ones, we've kept our 3 big guys and most of our core. So we extended Wani, Tyler Harvey, and Davo Hickey all the way through until 2027. Now, Davo coming off the back of the past 2 years that he's had, he absolutely deserved every last bit of that contract. Harvey, obviously, his entire family is down here. His wife, his daughter, like they're both down here. There's talks of him becoming a naturalised Australian, playing for Australia, all the rest of it, opening up another import spot for the Hawks. But Wani as well. Wani was one that the Hawks have definitely wanted to keep a key eye on. That stat line, Josh, 4 championships by the age of 23. He's a year older than me, and he's got four NBL championships. Like that's absolutely impressive. So to lock down him, it was pretty good.
Yeah, I kind of laugh about that situation, hey, with Wani, because you sort of look at those 4 chips and you go, well, he's been around some great teams. I believe it was, I know Perth was the first one. I think Melbourne or Sydney was the second one, and then Melbourne or Sydney was the third one, I'm pretty sure. So he's played and been a part of, obviously, some great franchises so far. But I think Wani's mantra and I guess mentality after this one is the fact that this is probably the one he's most proud of because this is the one he had the most impact for. And, you know, he's had that championship pedigree, which he's been brewing for such a long time. And I think the most exciting thing for Illawarra Hawks fans is he's not a guy who tries to do too much. He doesn't have to score 15, 20 points per game. He can happily score 2 points and come away feeling great about his game because he's held a Chris Goulding to 20, a Bryce Cotton to 15, you know, similar ilk to those players to low scoring games. That's where he has the most pride and that's where he has the perfect role for the Illawarra Hawks. So if I'm an Illawarra Hawks supporter, seeing him locked away until 2027, that makes me super excited because you have now got arguably a top 2 or 3 defensive player in the NBL. You probably put him just behind Shaylee, to be honest with you. But, you know, he's up in that echelon there where you're looking at one of the best defensive players in the whole entire NBL who has a little bit more flexibility than Shaylee. You know, Wani could probably guard 1 through 4, whereas Shay could probably guard 1 till 3, and that'd be pushing it as well. But he's a massive signing as well. Tyler Harvey, like you mentioned, super excited to see what he can do. If they can naturalize him, it's going to be a step in the right direction. Now, do I believe that they can have the money to go out and afford another import player on top of it as well? I'm not necessarily sure. I think if that was to happen, you're probably going to have to drop one of these local guys or be able to pay these guys a lot less than probably what they're worth as well, which may be the sort of Illawarra Hawks mantra going forward. You know, we see it all the time with this team mentality they're building as well. So that's going to be an interesting watch. And obviously Will Hickey as well. He is an absolute genuine superstar. I know I've copped a bit of flack there from the Illawarra Hawks faithful over the last couple of weeks, and half of it was stirring the pot and half of it was seriousness as well. But he is going to be a player in which is, I think, on the trajectory right now to being one of the greatest Australian players in the NBL. Over the next couple of years, he's on that trajectory right now to be able to push as a top 5 to 10 local in the NBL. So I think what they're starting to do now, and we'll speak about Justin Tatum's comments a little bit later in the show, but this core in which they're starting to build is really exciting. And I don't know if you mentioned him as well, but obviously Lachie Olbrich has signed away till 2026 as well. He's another guy who I'm sure you'd be excited about seeing, but obviously there's a potential of him entering the NBA draft and maybe getting picked up on a 2-way contract of some sorts as well.
Yeah, so we have locked him and then obviously Tatum away. Tatum's signed with the club till the end of 2027, like Wani, Harvey, and Hickey. Olbrich we've got until the end of next year. But yeah, as you've said, there's a lot of whisperers coming in about a potential draft nomination, whether that is this season or he takes, you know, the rest of next year and works on his game. Obviously with Froling being out, which we'll cover on in a second, that's a huge opportunity for him to step up and really show out and have that one solid year in a draft class next year, which really isn't the strongest draft class that we've seen in years, to really booster and bolster his draft stock.
It's going to be interesting because I sort of spoke to Lachie about this and he sort of said that he's waiting to hear what his agent sort of says about what the next step is. So it's going to be an interesting sort of decision there because as you speak about it, obviously we'll touch on it very, very shortly, but the Sam Froling situation is a very interesting one for a number of reasons. But Lachie Olbrich, I don't really think the hype is so real right now just due to that sort of final series and even the season as well. When he had the opportunity, he just dominated. And I don't really think necessarily it's going to hinder his draft stocks if he has another year, but I don't think it's going to hurt him going and having a crack this year because he can always sign as a 2-way player or a 10-day contract or anything like that the following season anyways, if he is undrafted this NBA season. So I don't know. He's going to be an interesting one, mate, but we'll sort of ramp that conversation up now a little bit with obviously going into who's out of contract coming in to NBL 26. And there's some big names out of contract. I'll just list off a couple of them right now. You've obviously got Mr. Toddy Blanchfield, Mr. 31, 16, 5 and 1 last night for the Illawarra Hawks NBL 1 team. You've got Darius Days, who's shipped himself over to Puerto Rico to play this off-season. You've got Sam Froling, obviously coming off of that Achilles injury, which will most likely rule him out for the majority of NBL 26. You've got hometown favourite Dan Greeter. You've got Trey Kell, HJ Lee, and also Mason Peatling coming off contract. So some really talented players, but this is where you may see a little bit of flexibility between these guys. And how sure are you that all of these guys will return, or a couple of these guys you're unsure of their returning status as of yet?
Yeah, look, there's been heaps of conversations going around town. Obviously, last night, getting to chat with all of the boys and just seeing how happy and engaged and enthusiastic they were. obviously for Trey, Tyler, and Darius, the life of a import basketball player, you go wherever you're called to. But these boys that have started to call this place home, it was just great to see them out there last night. And the majority of them, I can definitely see re-signing. I think the big one that they'll go after first and foremost after Froling is definitely Todd Blanchfield. And I think having that key pathway with him being in that NBL 1 East squad and then to come back, it's that veteran presence. And it wasn't on the interview last night, but I did get to have a chat to him further about it all, especially about Kobe and Brad being in that team and what it means for him being that role model figure. And he said, I know what it meant for me to have a role model at that sort of age coming into the league and to be that guy for everyone else with now the championship pedigree that I've got. He's like, it's just going to bolster and boost our team more than it's been in the past. Our NBL 1 East teams come last 2 seasons in a row now. Last year we won 2 games, lost 18. So we were second to last or dead last in the comp. And now we've gone and defeated the reigning champions in our first game at home. So it's pretty good to show up and show out like that.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be an interesting season there for sure. I'm excited about the Toddy Blanchfield perspective. Like, I don't really see him. I can't see him moving anywhere else. Like, I think he set himself up now, like you've mentioned there, obviously, as well. And he had a crucial role and was a crucial piece of that championship. And it's funny to say that because you probably sat there maybe last year, the year before, and you probably said he's probably got 2 or 3 years left in the tank. But you probably now sit there and go, he's probably got another 2 or 3 years in the tank to go as well. So that's an exciting prospect for Illawarra Hawks faithful as well. Sam Froling, though, let's digress into this a little bit more because the Achilles injury, they've said 6 to 9 months. I just can't see that happening. I think every Achilles injury in which I've seen, especially from the bigger guys, is closer to the 12-month mark than it is the 9-month mark. So if the calculations are correct, that'll basically rule him out till game 4 of the NBL finals next year. So it's essentially a full season that he is going to miss, I believe. Now, I'm not a doctor, but you go look at other people and you look at the NBA. I sort of get him to as close to a Kevin Durant as possible. Now, I know,
don't even,
but,
don't even,
but
mate.
the injury wise, I don't think his is as bad as a Kevin Durant's injury though. I don't think he did the whole pop and tear, but there's a slight tear in that Achilles and it could see him out for up to 12 months. So if you're the Illawarra Hawks right now, what on earth do you do? Like, I've got my thoughts, but I want to hear what your thoughts are from a supporter and somebody who's obviously had a bit of a couple of conversations with Froling as well.
Just touching on that KD comment, being a KD fan all my life, watching him go wherever he was, seeing him go down with the same injury, and then watching Sam do it. As soon as he did it, I'm like, that's an Achilles. Like he's gone. And it gave
there's
me
a dead giveaway
with
the Achilles, isn't there? Like there's a dead giveaway. It's the turn and thinking like someone's just stood on my someone stood on the back of my leg. That's the dead giveaway with an Achilles. Like if you see a player turn around and look behind them and then grab their lower leg, it's an Achilles straight away. So sorry to cut you off there, but yeah, it's a devastating injury for sure.
Yeah. It's one of those ones that as soon as you see it happen, you know straight away that it's what it is. And yeah, looking at him last night, his foot's still very much swollen and purple. He is in a cast. But yeah, I think the biggest thing for him though is, and after having a chat to him last night, obviously the rumors out there at the moment that the Hawks will look to have Harry Froling in there as the injury replacement player to then potentially, have that as a re-signing for Sam as well. But then it's also another thing where you've got Sam and Dan that are both roommates. They've grown up in the city together. Sam's first season was when he was 19 with LaMelo Ball. So we're talking the 2020-21 draft. So, he's young. He's still in the system and all the rest of it. He had that brief summer league stint with the Pacers. I think for the Hawks going forward, that's a guy that you want to keep no matter what. That's a guy that you want to go, we know you're injured, mate, but here's your money. It's not as much as what you probably would have gotten from a Sydney, from a Melbourne that were looking at him. But I think it will reflect what he has done for the club so far. and it will be an incentive to work on for the future as well. But especially with Tatum's comments around trying to get the entire core back together, which I know is our next topic of conversation. You can't have a core if you don't have Sam Froling in there, regardless if he's sitting on the sideline or if he's in there playing. You saw what he did in those timeouts when the boys came over to the bench in that final. He was straight in there. Straight in there. He was over the back of them. He was like, let's go. Come on, you've got this. With about a minute to go, that's when he came out and he celebrated. He partied hard. And the video's out there of him slowly jogging and running in there. But you can see the emotion on his face and what it meant to him.
Yeah, I think he's a certainty to re-sign with the Illawarra Hawks. I wasn't 100% set on him. I'd probably say a month ago re-signing with the Hawks. Like, I just thought the money that potentially Melbourne and Sydney could have offered him to lure him away was going to be just, I think at that point, probably a little bit of a thought. And if there's a thought, when it comes down to money, then I think there's obviously a chance. And I've had no contact with Sam about his particular contract at all. This is just my thoughts and my sort of feeling on the situation. But now the injuries happened. Now the fact that we may not see him for a full 12 months, I think he's a certainty to re-sign with the Illawarra Hawks. And I think they'll try to lock him away for 3 years. I think that's the sort of nice little contract there as well. But it'll be a heavily back-ended contract. So they won't want to have too much of a cap hit from him this season, which will allow them to go and find a player, whether it's a Harry Froling or an import player, to replace that position. Because I still think the one thing that the Illawarra Hawks got away with this NBL season was their lack of size. Like, I know they've got Froling, I know they've got Olbrich, but they're not the genuine big man center inside who can cause a bit of a presence. We saw Froling from time to time sort of get, I think, figured out is probably the best way, or exposed down low as well to a certain degree as well, against the likes of, the Cam Olivers of the league, these big men that can go downside and are quite athletic and fast as well. So that may be one thing in which the Hawks do have a bit of a look at this offseason, but I can see him being signed up for a $300,000 contract this year. And towards the back end of that deal, it's looking towards $900,000 to $1 million, just to obviously, be able to give him a bit more cash when he's playing in the prime of his powers, because he's 25 years of age. That's where a lot of people have got to think right now. Typically, I mentioned this on Beyond the Buzzer and our main show at the Basketball Fix. You're coming into the prime of your career now. So you are now, yes, he's going to miss a year. It's probably going to take him another full year to get back into that sort of, fitness and playing style and the confidence as well, and on the injury as well, because those are all mental parts of the game. But once he gets going, you're getting him at 27, 28, 29. Those are the prime years in which you want to have players on your particular team. So I think he'll return to the Illawarra Hawks, which is super exciting for Hawks fans. Harry's the one in which you sort of mentioned there as well. We're going to touch on him a little bit later in the rumors, but we'll do it now. He's had an incredible start to the NZNBL, and if that is the replacement player they bring in for a season, I love that from a Hawks perspective. It helps, obviously, Sam with the mental battles and everything that are going to go on over the next sort of 12 months, rehabbing an injury and being away from teams and sort of not being able to play as well. So having his brother, who has had his own challenges off the court, is going to be exciting for Hawks fans, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. The brotherly duo, you saw it in there when they both played for the Hawks a little while back, and everyone loves the Frolings here. Especially with Olbrich and all of these younger boys that are coming through as well. The team, the city, everything that we all stand for, it's family. This city is all about family, all about supporting one another through the highs, the lows, whatever it is, we do what it takes. And I definitely think, as you said, 3 to 350 is where the Hawks will probably sit at. It's probably not the 4 to 5 mark that he probably could have gotten from a Sydney or a Melbourne, but it's a nice little incentive to get him to stay with the club, to bring Harry potentially over here, and to keep these other names like your Greeters, like your Peatlings, like your Olbrichs still coming into the club as well.
Trey Kell, he's the guy I want to touch on next, because I'm not certain he's going to return. Like, I'd love to see him return come NBL 26, but I'm just not set right now. Like, he's a hard guy to read. Like, he's a very quiet dude, and he's going to demand a lot of money because he was arguably the best player for the Illawarra Hawks throughout the whole entire season. I think he will go down as, when it comes down to, I'm not sure if you guys have done your awards or whatnot, but I believe he'll probably win the club MVP. and sort of win it quite convincingly to a certain degree. I think obviously he was the most consistent throughout the season. Harvey had patches, Will Hickey got going in certain patches of the season as well. But from pure consistency from day one to the end of the season, he was the number one guy for the Illawarra Hawks. Does he return come NBL 26? Have you got any inklings? Have you heard any whispers? What are some of the thoughts around Mr. Kell?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to get invited and go along to the awards night, and it was just before our Southeast Melbourne playoff series. So the boys were hyped; they were ready to go. They had all of this time off from basketball, trying to get into a playoff series. It was that FIBA window break. They had the playing games, all the rest of it. But the boys were keen; they were pumped and ready to go. And they had a 3-way split between the MVP voting. And it ended up going to the 3-headed monster. So the MVPs for our club ended up being Kell, Tyler Harvey, and Sam Froling. With Trey, though, as you said, mate, it's one of those things where he is a very quiet, reserved person, but he just balls out when he needs to ball out. I'd love to see him return to the club. I think he's the guy that Jason Tatum wanted and brought in, and it's the guy that they'll want to bring back and secure. That being said, with Sam's injury, with Harvey potentially becoming a naturalized player, with all of these different players that you're looking at, it's potentially one of those things where you can offer him a little bit more money with breathing room because you've got all these other players willing to take less. You might have Harvey willing to take less because he's becoming naturalized and he doesn't have to make as much money as an import now. You've got Sam with his injury. He won't get the money that we would have had to have spent to keep him back with the club. He's one of the guys that I think will try and go after first and foremost, depending on what happens with his Chinese contract at the moment. He may stay there like we have seen with Gary Clark, or, he may take the jump back into the NBA. The one guy that I am worried about, though, and we haven't mentioned him, is Darius Days. Now, there's obviously been the rumor mill around lately that Gary Clark's coming back and all the rest of it. The only position that I can see him filling would be Days' position without having to get rid of someone like a Dan Greeder or like a Mason Peatling type.
Yeah, it's going to be tough because you lose Darius Days. Like, I can't see Harvey being naturalized before the start of NBL 26. And
Yeah.
I like your comments around Harvey, but obviously the fact that he's contracted through till NBL 27 means that money, probably 750, 800 is locked away now for those next couple of years, unless he wants to take a significant pay cut and add a year on top of that and restructure the contract. I don't think he will, but there's definitely that chance. But they'd have to lose if they want to bring back Gary Clark, in which we'll bring up quite shortly anyways, one of Kell or Darius Days. Now, obviously the easy one there is Darius Days will be making way for Gary Clark potentially, but I think Darius has got all the pieces to have an outstanding NBL career because he's a hard worker. He's a community guy. You can see it. I had an interview with him at the start of the year. He just loves all things Wollongong, and he loves the town, and he loves the city, and he loves the boys, and you could just tell he absolutely loved it. So if he was to be, unfortunately, moved on from the Illawarra Hawks, it'd be a sad day because you didn't get to see the best of him last season. That's simple as it is. You didn't get not to see the best. Yeah, that injury, that it really halted the season for sure. It killed momentum for him, and then it took a long time to get back into it. And he faced some challenges. Obviously, the media came out and said, the whole comment about get Days going and all this sort of stuff. He had some mental challenges as well off the court, but that's what happens when you're a 24, 25-year-old import. It's not been a 24 or 25-year-old, local talent where you have time to grow because you're a local guy. When you bring 3 imports in, you expect, I've said it all the time, 25 points per game, 10 assists, and 10 rebounds. And it's not attainable by nearly anyone. Your imports aren't there to go and be all scorers or all rebounders or all assist players. They've got to be different sort of game styles and game structures that make a team rotate and team work. So I don't know. He copped some unfair criticism throughout the season. I would hate to see him leave the Illawarra Hawks. But let's move on to, I guess, the big sort of question this offseason. Justin Tatum, obviously the father of Jason. I put out a little thing a couple of days ago about dream NBL moves and seeing Jason on the Illawarra Hawks team later on down the track. But Justin is, for a lack of no better word, building, and he is gaining attention rapidly. Will we see him back at the Illawarra Hawks franchise in NBL 26, or will we maybe seeing him pop somewhere in the NBA?
Yeah, so it's a funny one that you bring that one up because he's staying. He has said he will honor his contract until the end of 2027. They'll try their best. Obviously, his comments in the media, I want everyone back next year. That's already an inkling as into whether or not he's staying. At least for next year, we know that's for sure. We have seen it before with coaches, though, that third and final year, it's it's a nothing year kind of, where if nothing's happened the previous year, you look at Brian Gorge and 2 years of back-to-back non-finals appearances, you bounce in the first round of the playoffs. Justin, though, I don't think he would give up on the club. He's seen what the club's gone through. He knows the club's history. He's now a part of the club's history, and he's seen what the fans, the community, and what our culture in this club's about, and everything that he's building so far. There'd be no way that they'd be signing these guys to these 3-year contracts all the way until 2027 if he wasn't going to stay. My only thing, though, is now there was a rumor that came around the other day, but it was a potential for Justin to be the head coach of the Celtic Summer League team, and that Hickey was going to get a call up into the Summer League team. Whether or not that is actually true, we'll have to wait and see until that happens. But again, that's all just experience, name dropping, getting yourself in there, putting yourself out there. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. These boys will be back. They're looking to run it back. He'll be back.
Yeah, I said this on the Beyond the Buzzer as well when we spoke about this topic, because it's sort of one of interest to me. Now, obviously, the 3-year contract is a massive excitement part. Now, we don't know what some of the clauses are. There may be an NBA out clause. There may be some certain things in there in which obviously will cut the money off from obviously being fed to Justin Tatum, or them having to buy him out over the last couple of years if he does decide to pursue an NBA contract. But obviously we don't know the ins and outs of the contract. But it's these two quotes in which, as an Illawarra Hawks supporter, would make me nervous if I was. So I'm not obviously an Illawarra Hawks supporter. We've made that clear now. But the NBL is a place where I've put my stamp on. But at the end of the day, I have aspirations of wanting to get onto an NBA level to see how far I can push myself as a coach. So that's the first quote. The second quote, I've just finished up my first season of a 3-year contract, so we'll see what happens. So it's not I've finished my first year, and I'm looking forward to my second year. It's we'll see what happens. And that's where I sort of take the most out of it, because it's not a definite 100%, even though he's contracted to return to the NBL. I think he'll go over there and do some sort of summer league coaching, whether it's at the Boston Celtics, whether it's at another club. I think he'll get an opportunity. I don't think he'll be the head coach of a team, but I think he'll be somewhere on the assistant coaches, sort of somewhere, because you see the head coaches of these teams typically are the assistant coaches of the NBA teams. They get a bit of a chance to work their magic at that level down, essentially, to be able to work on a few things with these players. So I can't see him going over and being a head coach of a summer league team, but I can see him being on the coaching staff of one team. And that's what gets me excited for the NBL's prospect as a whole. We're seeing a guy who's been a coach of the year, an NBL championship coach, heading over and working on applying his trade. We saw it with Trevor Gleeson, obviously. It went over to the Toronto Raptors and spent some time over there, had a very successful bit of time there as well for them. So it has been done in the past. So I'm just not certain. Like, I know, and this is just going to be a bit of tongue-in-cheek sort of stuff, but Justin celebrated like he was one of the players on the court. I think that's pretty easy to say. Like, he was a guy who celebrated with the best of them and had so much fun. And that's where I sort of have a little bit of a worry as well, in terms of, will we see him back or will we not? These questions will be answered very shortly anyways. And I think from an Illawarra Hawks perspective, I hope he returns, because he has turned his club around in every aspect, both on and off the court. The way he's binded that community together, you can just see it. They've played the whole NBL's the villain, everyone else in the NBL's the villain perfectly. That's what you've got to do with a small team and these small markets and everything like that. You've got to bind them together really quickly as well. So I think if he is to leave, it's a super disappointing day for the Illawarra Hawks. But if he is to stay, my God, you're getting excited coming into NBL 26. But We'll get into the big question now, mate. Let's get into some of these rumors because there are rumors galore. NBL Free Agency kicks off in just under a week. I think it's Friday, the 4th of April will be the first day of NBL Free Agency.
Oh, yeah.
So that is going to be very exciting. I've got Pete Hawley coming on that day. We'll break down a couple of the big news and big stories from day one of NBL Free Agency. But, mate, let's get into some of these rumors because it's been rumored quite enough, I'd say, right now for us to be genuinely having a conversation about it. That Mr. Gary Clark, a former Illawarra Hawk, I believe he was a former All-NBL first teamer as well in his single season with the Illawarra Hawks, could be looking to return from Japan to play for the Illawarra Hawks. What are your thoughts, mate?
Look, you put out that thing on the Basketball Fix, the Instagram pages about our dream NBA moves and having Tatum come to the Hawks. And, you know, I think whilst Jason Tatum would be absolutely fantastic for the Hawks system, the next best thing is your Gary Clark. That man was absolutely unstoppable. If it wasn't for the fact that we had that one silly inbound play down in Melbourne, Wani turned and shushed the crowd, all the rest of it, they would have won that series against Melbourne. They would have been looking at a grand final series, probably could have taken it there as well. But that was a team that had come from 2-7 to start the season to then go win. I think it was something ridiculous, like 12 straight games they won or something. So it was absolutely ridiculous and unreal. And that's when it first started. And then obviously Gary getting his name out there, got a call up in the expansion draft of the NBA Summer League and the G League as well. So he got drafted to the Suns G League, and I was like, this is great. This is great for me as a Suns fan, being there with KD, all the rest of it. This is going to be great. And then obviously didn't get drafted to the team and then making his way to China. But lately, with all of these rumors coming through, he's that stretch four, technically, that the Hawks have probably needed for quite some time now. They haven't really had it in recent years. Sam used to show glimpses of it. He was originally, coming in shooting the three ball, but his game's evolved and come a long way since then. For me personally, I would love to see him back, but then again, as you said, it's either got to make way for Trey or you've got to make way for Days for Clark to come back in.
Yeah, it's a definite tough situation to be in, but his numbers in the 2023-24 NBL season were just incredible. 17 points per game, just under 8 rebounds, 2.3 assists, and shot the ball at 46%. So you got to see the caliber of a player in which he was, and he just, the season went on, he just dominated. Under Justin Tatum, we saw the best of him, and I was actually quite surprised to see him leave for NBL 25. I know money and everything was a situation. I understand that for sure, but the thing in which shocks me the most is him wanting to come back. So it's one of those situations in which you don't know that you're in a good thing until you leave it. And I think that's where Gary has sort of realized the assumption of, shit, I missed out this year. And that's the thing, like, this is the pinnacle. Winning an NBL championship is the pinnacle for all NBL players and people who have been a part of the league, because on a global standing now, this is the second or third best league in the world. And to miss out on an NBL championship where you're seeing, the sort of broadcasting and everything around the world just growing and growing and growing, you've got to kick yourself sometimes. I'm sure Gary has. And I think that's probably a major reason, a major draw card in which he wants to come back to the NBL, and particular for the Illawarra Hawks, because Justin Tatum is a guy as well who, let's just say he does return next season. That's a massive draw card for Gary Clark to be on the board because, well, NBA teams are going to be watching Justin Tatum very closely, potentially with the NBA sort of contracts and coaching talk as well. Gary's going to have eyes on him as well. Now, do I think he's going to return to the NBA? I don't think so at the age and everything like that as he is right now. But, having him back in this roster and this team is super exciting. And if he does return, I see Darius as a guy who could grow into Gary Clark, but there's still a long way to go. Whereas you bring a Gary Clark in, you've got that player straight away, because I think that's what, and it's obviously very unfair to sort of speak about this for Darius, but he was a developing Gary Clark. So that's where you've got to see the difference between those two. But it's going to be exciting. I think a lot of Illawarra Hawks fans are hopeful that he will return, because you see it all the time. We post stuff, people say stuff. There is a genuine excitement that Gary Clark will return for NBL 26. But a couple of other rumors, obviously, for this particular team coming into NBL 26, in which we'll just briefly touch on. You've got the Angus Brandt, Harry Froling, and Thon Maker rumors, in which I guess, always come up to a certain degree. It's always the fact of if Angus Brandt is to return from the NBL, it will be to the Illawarra Hawks or the Perth Wildcats. Very similar with Thon Maker as well. If he wants to return to the NBL, it'll be the Illawarra Hawks or the Perth Wildcats. They've had links to these guys and everything like that. What are your thoughts? I think they're the perfect pieces for the Illawarra Hawks, is what I was trying to allude to earlier when we're talking about, them getting that genuine big guy inside. Would you be happy with either of those two guys?
Oh, look, Branty, Thon Maker, and Nick Kay have been names that have been floated in not only our free agency tracker, but, Hoops free agency tracker, ESPN, NBL free agency trackers. They're names that have been floated for Hawks and for yourself for Perth as well for as long as I can remember now. And they're guys that genuinely deserve to come back to the league and be in the league, but they've been out of it for so long that our league has evolved to, you said the second or third best. I think it's the second best behind the NBA. There is no league unlike ours. We say it all the time on the Hawks Hangout, but as he said, it's no cupcake league. You come in here and you see these guys putting their hearts and souls into teams, and for those three, I don't feel like they would fit what the Hawks are looking for. I feel my thing is, if Tatum gets a call up to the summer league or anything like that, watch this space for some import signings from an NBA standpoint of view to get that genuine big guy 5, or look for them to try and get a local player for dirt cheap. My thing with Harry, though, it's a big push to try and get him in here, because, as I said before, you get him in here, it keeps Sam, it keeps Dan, it keeps everyone happy, it keeps the fans happy. He comes back to an NBL team, which is the team that he was with when that unfortunate incident happened. But it's a team that wanted him and didn't get to see the best out of him. But he gets to play the 5. It pushes Sam back down to the 4, which is where he belongs. He doesn't have to be that interior big man running the paint, running the floor. You can keep Lachie at the 5. You can keep Harry at the 5. He can slot back down to the 4, and it gives you breathing room and flexibility with your rotations and your rosters as well. So I think that's the big story to come out of all of this. I'd be watching this space to see if they go after Harry first, because if they go after Harry first, the next signing after that will be Sam. The next signing after that will be Dan. And then whatever else happens.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting off-season nonetheless. And I think this is one in which there probably isn't as many rumours right now as what there are every other team in the NBL. But I think that's a positive thing for Hawks fans. That's what you've got to take away from it. If Gary Clark is the only player that you guys bring in from the difference of NBL 25 to NBL 26, you're laughing, and obviously Harry as well, potentially with Sam's injury replacement and everything like that. But if there are as minimal moves as possible, that's a very exciting prospect for the Illawarra Hawks come NBL 26. So I'm excited, mate, but thank you very much for jumping on today's episode. It's been fun, obviously, breaking down the Illawarra Hawks' off-season plans, the contracted players, the uncontracted players, and some of the biggest stories. But from a Hawks Hangout perspective, mate, what have you guys got going? I'm sure there's a lot of Illawarra Hawks faithful listening to the episode and still listening right now. So what has the Hawks Hangouts got on the cards for the NBL off-season, mate?
Hopefully they're all still listening. It's long episode like normal because I'm just rambling. But yeah, we've got heaps of things in the works. Big massive shout out to Principal Brewing and Enable You to our amazing sponsors. We've got some courtside seats, so we get to sit down courtside. We get to be in amongst all of the action at all of the NBL 1 East home games. So you'll see us at all of the home games, but all the away games as well. We'll try and make as many as possible. It's only just a short trip up the freeway, potentially doing some collaborations with SJ and the love of the game as well with all of the Sydney teams. But you'll probably be seeing a lot more of us doing a lot of our own coverage from a free agency standpoint of view. Obviously, as Josh has said, kicks off on April 4th. Make sure you check out the Basketball Fix podcast for all your free agency needs. It's going to be absolutely hammering, mate. Cannot wait.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy time of the year, mate. I'm already half regretting it, but half looking forward to it. You know, I think this is the most exciting period of time for me, mate. I love it. Obviously, all the Instagram content will be coming out left, right, and center. We'll be collaborating with the boys and everything. Everything we put up, you'll see it on their Instagrams as well. And I'm sure they'll be doing their own hard work as well. But there is plenty going to be happening with the NBL Free Agency Fix, in particular this episode and these podcasts, and also the Basketball Fix Instagram pages, social medias, everything like that, as well as the Hawks Hangouts Instagram and social medias as well. So, mate, it's been an absolute ripper episode. I'm looking forward to seeing what the NBL Free Agency can produce for your Illawarra Hawks. And until next time, we hope you've gotten your basketball fix.
Clock at 10. Adams the off balance.